Hello, health students. Welcome back to lecture time for Health 4. I just wanted to briefly go over really quick what here we go. What Canvas looks like for you. Hopefully, if you're listening to this lecture, you already know this. But when you go click on our class in Canvas, this is what you'll see. You'll see the all of the various things. I don't think you may or may not be able to see all of these things right now. The most important things are the modules. So when you open these up, you'll see you can click the syllabus. You can look at the first assignment, the introductory email, of which I think I've received 4 by the time of this recording. And then by the time you are watching this lecture, there'll be a second introduction to chapter 1 part to the module, and it will talk about this lecture and the assignments that are due for this chapter. The important part is, well, the next important part is to make sure that you have connection to the textbook. Now, some of you have already contacted me about waiting for funds to be available, which I completely understand. So let me know if you can't access the book, because then we'll have to think about some other way for you to be successful in this class, because it really does require this book, just because of the way that the online system works. Okay, but so once you do get into the system, you'll hit begin, and then it'll go into, once you hit the McGraw-Hill, and it'll walk you through the welcome, and I don't know. Yeah, this assumes I've already bought access to the book, because as the instructor I have. And so when you click this link, it'll ask you for a code if you have bought it through the school, excuse me, what am I trying to say? Through the textbook is incorrect. Through the textbook store, the bookstore, that's the word I'm looking for. Or if you have a voucher, I know people are having problems with a voucher. If you talk to the the bookstore, they should be able to help you with that. You can also buy the book content or connection directly through this link. Okay. All right. So that's enough time spent me forgetting words here. Let's go back and let's talk about what today's lecture is about. So today we are going to be talking about going into chapter 1 a bit more, and we're going to start with this idea of of resolutions. Now you may be saying, hang on now, I know this is online and we can watch it at any time, but this class happens before the new year. But we're actually going to talk about the science of resolutions, and this is actually this talk was given published in 2012, but it's still very, very relevant, and the science is still very true in that there are reasons why New Year's resolutions work and why New Year's resolutions fail. And in this case, we aren't actually going to wait until the new year to look at resolutions. We're going to find ways to change our behaviors to be more healthy and improve our wellness, okay, as individuals. And it's the same kind of science that goes into making a New Year's resolution. So we're going to take a second, by that I mean 5 minutes, to watch this video by Mike Evans. And I actually like his stuff a lot, so we may refer back to it a few times in this class. This one. So let's take a few seconds to watch this.
Weight loss?
Let's go back to the beginning. All right.
Hi, I'm Dr. Mike Evans. Well, it's the end of one year and the beginning of another. Time of renewal. Maybe you're thinking about making your life better in some small or large way. Maybe it's a lifestyle change like quitting smoking or walking more. Maybe it's about being more grateful for what you have, or calling your mom more often. Maybe it's to travel around the world. Almost half of us make a commitment to making a positive change in our lives for the new year. And when I think about it, it's pretty incredible. Maybe something we need to learn a bit more about. Dr. John Norcross, a leading researcher in New Year's behavior change, is a clinical psychologist at the University of Scranton in Pennsylvania. He and his colleagues have answered many questions about resolutions. I guess the first question is, do they work? And the answer, surprisingly in some ways, is yeah, they kind of do. Dr. Norcross had 2 research assistants call random people in Scranton to ask them about resolutions between December 26th and December 31st. Over 400 agreed to be studied. It turned out there were 3 groups: those that weren't interested in making a change, those that were in the contemplation stage, interested in making a change, but just not at New Year's, and finally those that wanted to make a New Year's resolution. 41% wanted to make a New Year's resolution, and the 3 top behaviors were, number 1, weight loss, followed by starting an exercise program, and then stopping smoking. Now, when they followed up with the contemplators, so the people who initiated their change at another time than New Year's, it showed about half were still successful after 2 weeks of making a change. But then the success rate dropped to about 4% after 6 months. So not so good in the long run. But when we look at those that made their commitment to change at New Year's, 71% remained successful through weeks 1 and 2, and their success rate dropped to about 46% at 6 months. That means, at least at 6 months, people who picked New Year's as their time of change were 10 times more successful. Now, I suspect in the real world, this change might be an overestimate because of things like the participants being studied and some unintended bias in selection, but still, that's a significant improvement. So I have 2 questions about this. Why is the success rate higher when you make your resolution at New Year's? And 2, what is it about the 46% that made them more likely to be successful at 6 months and sustain the positive behavior? Well, it's difficult to say what it is precisely about New Year's, but I think a lot of what we do is about culture. And I think New Year's creates a pocket to stop and to think, to be mindful, to reflect, to go public with a change and to support others that are changing as well. This ability to reflect is the key educational skill I want my students and residents to have, to be what we call a reflective learner, to see our personal strengths and weaknesses, to have clarity about priorities, to balance optimism with realism, to have flexibility. We all have the capacity for this type of learning, but our busyness and I think our habits often get in the way. To answer the second question about the attributes of successful changes is even more interesting and I think more science-based. My own read of the literature is, I think, in many ways the reverse of what most people think. Many of us, when we think of successful change, often think of big goals and use terms like motivation, willpower, and self-control. You have these attributes if you're successful, and if you don't, you'll fail. Well, I kind of see the reverse. I see success linked with small goals and small wins. I see more facilitation than motivation, more self-monitoring than self-control. Willpower isn't static. It kind of comes and goes, and instead of fending off one urge after another, these people set up their lives to minimize temptations. Science tells us if you have a bigger bucket of popcorn, you'll eat it. Good changers know this, and they play offense, not defense. They schedule weekly activities or games, throw out the ashtray, they put out their running shoes. They use their high willpower moments to prepare for their low willpower moments. They cut fruits and veggies and put them at the front of the fridge. They call and make an appointment with the trainer. I think we're creatures of habit. We do the same things over and over, and looking at your average week for low-hanging fruit is a great start. How can you make your trip to work a bit harder? Can you do a little homework to change up your shopping slate, to make that food that you graze on more nutritious? Can you replace your flavored drinks with plain old water? Can you say hi to the odd person you don't know? Can you sit in traffic and just be in the moment instead of honking the horn? When I think of successful changers, I actually don't think of the CEO laying out a large agenda or goals. I think more of the plumber or carpenter. These people come prepared with tools. They know they need to reframe and adapt older structures, but they also know they can build what needs to be built. Better habits, one room at a time. Now, January was named by the Romans to honor Janus, the god of beginnings and transitions. He faces both the future and the past, and I think that is what is special about New Year's. Learning from the past, but pointing to a new you and saying, that's where I want to go. I hope this helps you get there. Happy New Year.
Okay, so I'm going to link to this video so you can come back and watch it anytime you need to. And so there are things we can take away from this, which is why we use this video in this class a lot. And the biggest one is that we're going to look at the steps that he talks about. So obviously it's not the new year, and the new year is a good time for people to be making resolutions and change because everyone's doing it at the same time, and you can watch each other and you can help each other and you can hold each other accountable. And it turns out that's a huge thing. But the things that we can take away from this are these 3 big ideas: that you need to know your strengths and your weaknesses. You need to have the tools, or you need to know what strategies you need to make changes. And you need to do it in small steps for the greatest chance for success. Now, everybody always says, oh, I want to be my healthiest self. I want to be, or if they don't yet, they will. You know, there's this idea that the younger we are, the more immortal we think we are, and we think we can survive anything and everything's great. But eventually everyone comes to realize, oh, I need to be healthy so I can survive, this thing called life. And so if everybody wants to be healthy, how do we do this in ways that are, how do we make sure we do things that will help us be healthy? Because I gotta tell you, our brains don't want us to do the thing that is harder, or eat the food that is better for us, because there's a reason that people get addicted to sweets or to foods that are bad for them. We've evolved in a world where it's actually really hard to find sweet things, but they give us a lot of energy. Well, now we can get sweet things very easily, or things that have a lot of carbs in them or whatever. And so it becomes a lot easier to get that food, and our biology has not caught up with our technology. So there's a problem there, and we have to consciously tell ourselves, don't eat the whole bag of chips, don't eat the whole bag of cookies, or whatever it is, if we're talking about weight gain kinds of things and health that way. But we can't just say, well, today I'm going to lose 100 pounds. Because first of all, if you lose that much weight in that much time, you're probably losing a limb, and that's very bad for you, okay? So it's this idea of knowing what you're looking for, and then knowing how to get there, and making small steps that are the ways that you can actually change a behavior in a meaningful way. And I only use the idea of sugar and weight because I am eating cookies while I do this. But you know what? I'm only eating one cookie instead of the whole bag. So we all have changes to make. Keep on moving. So you're going to see one of your first assignments is in this chapter is a wellness worksheet. And what you're going to do is you're going to evaluate your lifestyle. So what do you do that you could be doing better? Or are there, do you have blind spots for things in your life that you can look at to see ways to be a more healthier person? You're going to create a wellness profile. And what is the point of these things? What these things do is they give you a wellness profile. They're kind of fun. They're like BuzzFeed quizzes that actually end up meaning something. So instead of finding out which Harry Potter house you're in, you're going to find out where you have rooms to increase your wellness in your own lifestyle, okay? So, and it's going to let you see what behaviors are maladaptive, so what behaviors are bad for you and that are holding you back from reaching these goals. And the biggest thing is none of this is judgmental. None of it is judgmental. This is all for you to evaluate, to see where are places where I can make changes to be a healthier person, to have better wellness, okay? And as a science person, I can tell you, data is never judgmental. It's never going to look at you and say, oh, I can't believe you found this protein in that blah, 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 whatever. No, it's just for you to say, okay, that's interesting. Does this tell me anything? And that's the analysis part. So the data is when you actually look at what you're gathering data on what you're doing. And the analysis is where you look at it and say, okay, so what does this mean? And this will all make a lot of sense when you're actually doing it. And at the end, one of the biggest things that the doctor in the video talked about is how New Year's resolutions work, because they're kind of a contract. So you say, okay, so this day is the day I get to restart, and everyone else is restarting with me, and I'm going to say, I know I'm doing this, and I'm going to do it this way, and I'm going to tell the world that I'm doing it, because then I'm making the world hold me accountable for it. So it's a lot easier to hold yourself accountable to go to the gyms, for instance, if you have a gym buddy, because it's a lot harder to cancel on somebody who expects you to be there than it is to do it yourself. It's very easy to tell yourself, well, I'll just go to the gym tomorrow. But if you and a friend already decided, no, we're going to make sure we go today, then it's a lot harder to get out of it. Okay, so this contract is going to be where you are making an agreement with yourself and with me, because I'm grading it. And again, I'm not judging at all. I'm not judging it at all for, oh, I can't believe you did this. No, I am going to be looking at, are you making a reasonable goal? And is this something, are you taking steps where you can actually reach this goal? So not only are you learning about this in this class, but hopefully you're learning how to make a change, and maybe you'll even make that change through this class. Okay, so these are simple questionnaires that look at your lifestyle choices that affect your health. Okay, so it'll be asking you, what kind of foods do you eat? Are you a smoker? How much exercise do you get? And exercise is a big place where, again, our brains want us to be as lazy as possible. Everything in the universe is set up to conserve energy as much as possible, and that includes your muscles. So it can be very easy to be like, oh, I don't want to do anything today. I don't want to do workouts. I want to get in my car, drive to the thing, sit at my desk, drive back home, get back on the couch. Okay, that your brain says, this is good, this is great, I haven't wasted any energy, this is fabulous. But it turns out that's not good for us, because we need to move around more than we do as human beings, especially in a developed nation such as the U.S. And so this is another place where you can really look at, well, how many steps did I take today, and how can I make this better? Can I park a block away and then walk to my car that way? If that is now in that kind of situation, you have to also look at other things like the environmental wellness. Is it a safer neighborhood? Is it less safe, etc.? We'll get into it. Smoking, you're gonna see we're gonna talk a lot about that, and we'll talk about vaping as well, because there's a lot of new information with vaping. Okay. But these worksheets are initial ways to help you decide on what behavior change you want to make, because you don't want to look at them and be like, I'm changing everything, because that's not a reasonable goal. Okay, you want to pick one thing and work that at a time. Okay, and so this is where you're going to say, do I want to work on my mental health, or do I want to work on managing stress? Do I want to work on eating, etc., etc. And this is where you're not going to if you want to go through this forest, you don't mow through the entire forest. You pick a path and you take it. Okay. All right. So this is, let's look at risk factors. So a risk factor is any behavior that we choose, that contributes to behaviors we choose contribute to our risk factors for certain illnesses. Okay. So this gives us some control over our health. Again, if you decide to, at night after dinner, take a walk around the block instead of watching one more episode of The Office, that is a place where you can take some control of your health. Okay. Remember we talked about this in the last lecture, that nearly half the deaths in the US are linked to things such as tobacco use, improper diet, abuse of alcohol and drugs, the use of firearms, motor vehicle accidents, and risky sexual practices. And these things, to a certain extent, are controllable risk factors. Now, this is not taking into account things like addiction, which are very, I've been to a debate recently talking about, is addiction something that can be controlled, or is it something more, where should addiction be monitored by the law or by health situations, basically, is what the debate was about. People kept missing the fact that there are addiction problems with alcohol use and things like that, or certain sexual practices. There are addiction issues, and things like, and so it's something that people need to be made aware of, that it's not something as simple as just saying, well, just stop. Okay. Same thing with something like improper diet or lack of exercise. Perhaps your lack of exercise might be due to a disability, and so that's something you need to take into account. And this is where something like I am guilty of spending a lot of time on Instagram, but I make a point of only following positive people, because I know that I will get into the habit of saying, well, I'm not as good as that person if I'm following influencers, who maybe are Fitspo people, or they're doing something that I know I will start to feel bad about. And this is something that I do on purpose. I take control of it because I know it causes me stress. And so on Instagram, I tend to follow previous students and that have asked me, follow my journey in this, whatever, if they ask. And I also follow a lot of animal blogs because I'm a biologist, and I follow a lot of artists because it makes me happy. And I don't tend to follow people who I know I will compare to myself. Okay, so that is a way that I can control certain risk factors, because one of my biggest things that I decided to change recently in my life was my stress input, because there's no way I can change the stress of my job, because being an instructor is interesting, but there is a way I can change the stress outside of my job and the stress or how I deal with stress. So these are the things you're thinking of. Okay. There are things you cannot control. You can't control your age, your gender, and your ethnicity, okay? So these are uncontrollable risk factors, and in this case, these are just things that it's good to know about, okay? It's good to know, if you're a biological female, that your hormones cycle in a very, very different way than if you're male, okay? If you are certain ethnicities, you are genetically predisposed to certain illnesses, etc., etc., okay? We'll get into those things in a lot of detail. Okay, so let's say you pick something. How are you going to take care of it? Okay, so let's talk about what shapes the change in behavior. Okay, so we have these predisposing factors. Okay, so if you knowing, there's this whole thing, knowing is half the battle. I think that's from a G.I. Joe cartoon in the 80s. But the idea is, can you know too much about what you're doing? And as a scientist, I say no. Know as much as possible. But sometimes it's like with, if you decide you're going to do yoga, should you follow all the Instagram yoga people, or is that going to stress you out? And so there is a limit in when you need to stop, like, looking for the knowledge and start doing the thing. Okay. So in this way, you want to make sure that you believe you can make the change. Okay. I do not think I could suddenly become a pro skier. I have never skied in my life. Okay. So that is not going to be a behavior change that is a reasonable one for me to say, today I'm going to be a pro skier. That is bananas. Okay. So I would have to go in and do the baby steps, like we were talking about, those little steps to make the change if that was my goal. It is not. I live in a place that doesn't get snow on purpose. Okay. So believing that you can make a change is a huge piece of this. Okay. So pick something that you want to change that you know that it is something reasonable. Okay. So think about the locus of control. Is this something you can do? So locus of control, is this an internal change or an external change? So doing more exercise is an external locus of control. Maintaining your control of your diabetic, of your insulin, that is an internal thing. You can't control how your body takes care of insulin, but you can control if you're diabetic when you take the medicine. Okay. So a lot of this class is going to be talking about that motivation and commitment to making the change. So this could be the change that you decide to make in your behavior contract it could be something that your doctor has been telling you for years, or it could be something you just want to try differently, or it could be something as we go through the lectures you may see, oh wait, I didn't know that was a thing, and I'm really worried about that. Okay, and so that could be where your motivation and your commitment comes in. Okay. And it's always very, very important to have supportive people on your side, okay? One of the biggest ways to drop a habit is if you don't have anyone saying, hey, how are you doing on that thing? How are you doing on your goal? Okay, now I am going to be your biggest supporter of this, as long as it's not something that's not healthy or will not contribute to your wellness. So you can always, always, always contact me and say, hey, Megan, I exercised for 20 minutes today instead of 0, and I will send you so many happy emojis, because that is amazing to me. Anytime people can do these positive changes in their lives, it is one of the happiest things for me to see. Just going to college is something where you are doing something that is bettering yourself, and that is, or taking a college class. I know some people have contacted me as high school students taking this class as college students, either for credit or to get ahead, and that's amazing. It's beautiful. It's wonderful, and I say that with all sincerity. Can't talk. Okay. So make sure you have somebody in your life, even if it's me, and I am serious, I will be your supportive person that can be your support person. Okay. And the biggest part of this is look at your data. The data is the information that provides you greater understanding of where you are beginning with your behavior change, and also helps you see barriers, okay? So when you look at, I want to change this thing. If you say, maybe my goal is to run a marathon by the end of the semester. Well, make sure, if you have ankle problems, maybe that's not the best goal. Or maybe you can find a way to make certain braces or whatever to look at these barriers and find out, well, if this is a barrier, what do I need to do about it? Okay. All right. So here's the thing. This is another, it's another video I will link to at the end of this. It's a very good analysis of why we do what we do in life and business. Okay, so we have these cues that will then say, hey, I'm gonna go do a thing, and then I'm rewarded. Okay, if you want to change a habit, you need to change the reward pattern. Okay, so the kind of the quintessential example of this is Pavlov's dogs. So the original study was Pavlov, this Russian, I believe, scientist, had a thing where right before he'd feed his dogs, he'd ring a bell. And then so he'd ring a bell, and then he'd show them food, and the dogs would start salivating. Okay, so that's the now called Pavlovian response. And really, the true Pavlovian response to this is that anytime someone says Pavlov's dogs, they immediately think of that experiment. That's how ingrained this is in our own memory and how that Pavlovian response works. I've seen this done in animals like cuttlefish, where there was a study done at the University of Texas in Galveston, the medical branch at Galveston, where they had cuttlefish are like these, they're related to squid and octopus, and they can change color based on their environment or their mood or whatever. And someone set up a TV right next to this tank of cuttlefish, and they turned it on at the same time every day, and they watched the cuttlefish change color in response to the color changes coming from the TV. And after however many weeks of this study, they turned off the TV and they put it away. And the cuttlefish would still come to that part of the tank and change color the same time every day. So then the people showed up in the lab, the cuttlefish were like, well, it's TV time. And they would start getting ready to do that color change. Okay, so they had, who knows what the reward was in cuttlefish? We're still trying to figure out how they work. But the idea is, if once you change that behavior and the reward changes, your brain can change, okay? And so you can make that behavioral change. So this is very important. It is very, very important to figure out what your cue, your routine, and your reward are, and change that routine. And always make sure you give yourself a reward, okay? So let's look at what that means, okay? So we're finding out more and more with the mindfulness movement that it's very important to review your habits and just kind of don't think about it judgmentally. Like, one of the worst things you can do is called rumination, and sometimes it's hard to break out of this routine, where at night you sit and you think, oh my God, I can't believe I did that thing today. Oh my God, I can't believe I said that thing today. And so it's called rumination because it's, so ruminants are animals that chew their cud. So basically they swallow some food and then it gets digested a bit and then they hawk it up again and they chew it some more, and that's chewing the cud. So ruminants chew their cud. So if you are ruminating, you are basically chewing over something that's happening in your brain. You're thinking about it over and over and over. And when you do that, you cause a physical stress response. And so even though our brain even though you're not being actively pursued by anything dangerous, your brain treats it just like that. So you might as well be being chased by a lion, because your brain treats it the same way, and you start to mount this big stress response. We'll talk about it. And so when you review your habits within a day, you have to do it in a way that is non-judgmental, okay? And this is one of the hardest things for people to do, because it's just our nature to look at our day and be like, well, I could have done it better. No. Every day is a new day. Just look at what you did and then say, all right, cool, I did this. Data, analyzed, moving on. Okay? Because then once you look at your habits, you look at these normal things you normally do, you can say, well, but tomorrow I'm going to do it a little differently. Okay? Done. And then when you do that, okay, cool. You could tell yourself, well, as soon as so my cue is I'm going to get off the bus. And then my routine normally is I'm going to go to Starbucks and I'm going to order a grande latte with 16 extra shots of whatever. I don't know. I read some news story about people adding 1 million extra shots. It's so bad for you. And then I'm going to get back on the bus and go to class. Well, how about, your cue is you get off the bus, you change that routine, and maybe you get a tea or something, and then you walk to class, okay? And then give yourself a reward at the end. So maybe the reward at the end is you buy a cookie, something, whatever it is. That reward part is still very, very important, because the whole time you're doing the routine, which is something new, your brain's like, why am I doing this? And you got to tell your brain, because there's a cookie, because I'm going to do something at the end of this. And it has to be something actually concrete, because you can't say because it's better for me, because your brain's like, okay, cool, but what if we die? Who cares? Okay, you need to give yourself something concrete to say, I'm doing this so that I can get to the next thing. I can get to the happy thing. When we talk about drug use, we'll talk about the drug dopamine, and dopamine is the hormone, the neurotransmitter that tells your brain this is good, it's exciting, I'm so excited. It's an anticipation hormone, okay, or anticipation neurotransmitter. And what this means is if you're watching a show or something and there's sexual tension between two characters and you're so excited, even though you're not there, you're not doing the thing, you're just watching this, there's an anticipation and your brain's like, I'm ready for the reward, the kissing, or whatever, okay? The same thing happens when you're doing a routine yourself. So you are in the routine and you're anticipating, and that dopamine starts getting released, saying, oh my God, I'm so excited, I know I'm gonna get a cookie out of this. But you're doing this while you're doing something like jogging or whatever it is your routine is that you're changing. And so it makes you more likely to continue that new, better routine. Okay, so how will we look at these things? One thing you can do to make sure that you are self-assess, so look at how you're doing things in a non-judgmental way, is take some sort of a journal. So you can reflect on this will let you write the data down, will help you reflect on your change and help you determine where you're starting and why you're there. So I have started doing this myself, but I'm bad about writing things down, so I just record myself talking, because It just helps. It's fine. And then later when I'm in the car, the next day or something, I can review the week and think about, oh, I did this. Now I'm going to change it a different way. Okay. It's fine. However you do your journaling, it will help you kind of keep track of what you're doing. And there's so many apps that are good for this. Okay. And the things you want to record and think about really are your diet, your exercise, your stress. So now there's a lot of mood tracking apps where you can change the emoji so you can say, well, today was a good day or today was a horrible day, and then it'll track it over time. You can look at environmental factors such as, oh, it was raining today, or, there's a wildfire today, or whatever that may be influencing you and your behaviors in ways that you either do understand or you just don't even realize are happening. And this will also, you can start testing and evaluating. This could be things like blood tests, or it could be things like looking at your day and saying, oh, yeah, this was good. This worked for me. Or, oh, I tried this thing and it really didn't work for me. Okay. And this is where you can actually put these things on paper. Our brains, yeah, they're amazing. We just have one of the coolest brains in the animal kingdom, but they're also really good at faking us out sometimes. So it's very easy to forget specific data if you don't write it down. And it's very easy to say, well, maybe that day wasn't as bad as I thought it was, when actually it was horrible. And so you want to make sure you're putting this data down somewhere where you can go back and review it later to watch your progress. It's also very cool to go back and be like, whoa, I've really progressed really far from where I started. Okay. So again, a journal is a really good way for you to do this self-assessment. Okay. Also, be as descriptive as possible because, again, our brain forgets the little details. Okay. So make sure, especially if you're not really paying attention when you write these things down, it'll go into your long-term memory very, very vaguely, and you want to put it in very concretely so you can come back to it and look at changes later. For example, it could be something very, very fancy schmancy in a spreadsheet is the word I'm looking for. There are apps that will do this for you where you put in the food you ate. It tells you the calories. It tells you, don't know what hunger rating. How hungry were you? And you can see, well, if I was super, super hungry, does that change how much I ate? This is someone who's trying to change their food habits. Are they eating for certain reasons? Are they, when they're talking to their friends, do they eat better? Do they eat worse? Etc. Okay. And, this gives so much detail. Okay. It could be that complicated. It could be this, in depth, but a lot of us don't have time for this much in depth. So one of these things, it could be something you put in your phone really quickly, just in your notes, whatever. Just make sure you're doing this in a way where you can actually go back and review your data to see how you're changing, or if there are things that are causing you to do something. Like maybe maybe your goal is to decrease your stress, but you notice you're really stressed out only in one certain class, or maybe you're really, really stressed out just when you're in the library studying and that one person is there and they're smacking their gum and you never realize it, but it's that gum and you just want to punch them and you kill, whatever. As long as you may come back and be like, oh, well then if I see that person, I just will leave, or if, whatever. So you might be able to tweak little habits to make yourself a more healthy person as a result. All right. Data. What's up with data? We love data, you guys. Science people love data. Health people love data. Medical people love data. Data is a way to really look at changes, and it's equal to some sort of measurement or number. So this can be hard if you're looking at something like mood, because it's hard to really put a number on a mood. So you have to kind of define what that means when you're doing it. Like if I feel this happy, I'm going to call it a 10. Or maybe if I feel manic, that's a 12, whatever. Okay. So you have to kind of give yourself definitions for these things. When you're looking at wellness changes, these things can include a big one that college students talk about a lot is as they don't get enough sleep. Okay. And so we will do a whole lecture on sleep. We'll talk about it. It could be if you smoke or how many times you vape. It could be how much water you drink, how many times fast food is eaten, etc. I teach an environmental class and I had students record for a week everything they threw away. And one kid said, wow, I didn't realize how much applesauce I eat. And so it was because they were doing the data, they noticed things they'd never noticed before. Okay. And that's why we want to write these things down to be like, oh, I didn't realize that every time I see that guy in the library who chews his gum really loudly, I go and eat In-N-Out afterwards because I'm so annoyed and it makes me happy. And then there's something to that happiness, which is important, but that release is very fleeting compared to the health detraction going on. We'll get into it. Okay, but because the data is there, you can make that conclusion. Okay, so why do we care? Why am I talking about this? Because we need to be able to set realistic goals for ourselves, okay? So keeping data allows you to track your progress and know whether you've met your goal or not. Because maybe your goal is to sleep a certain number more hours a night, but if you never recorded how many hours you're actually doing, you may be like, well, I'm getting more sleep. Why do I not feel better or whatever? But actually you're not getting more sleep. Maybe it's because you didn't write it down. You don't know how much you started with, how much you ended with, etc. So it's always really good to take data on the progress you're trying to make. Okay. And then once you have all that data, you can look at that data and analyze it and say, well, how did I do? What did I do? What's keeping me from what I want to do? I did better than I thought, whatever. Okay. So, you could look at things like, why do I only get this much sleep? When do I decide to smoke? Why do I drink? Etc., etc. And you can say, oh, there's a reason why I always drink on Thursdays, and it's because the happy hour is so cheap, or whatever. Okay. This analysis, again, it just takes that data and lets you look at it and make conclusions to help you kind of make strategies to change your routines in healthy ways. All right. So let's talk about enabling factors that help you make a behavior change. Okay. So strategies. How will you make this change, especially when willpower is low? It's so hard to make changes when you're tired and you're like, I will do it tomorrow. But if you say that every day, then it doesn't change, right? So it takes a lot of self-discipline, which is focus and control. And if you're taking data and you're like, I have to write this down for my class, or Megan's going to be sad because she's the person who is my success partner and I have to check in with her, that might help you gain self-control and focus, self-discipline, okay? It also helps if you have good strategies and then resources to help you look at how you can make these changes. Okay, so this class is all about helping you develop those strategies and those finding those resources. Okay, this class is a resource as well. Okay, and this seems so silly sometimes, but it is actually very, very important to envision that you are succeeding. Okay, and there are classes where they say close your eyes and imagine that you are the person you want to be. But that sounds very goofy, but it actually works. Okay, and so there's something in our human weirdo brains that says if I can picture that thing happening, it might actually happen. Okay, and this positive self-talk is really important. If you tell yourself, well, I'll never be that, well, your brain's like, cool, then why am I going to spend energy on it? And then you lose motivation, you lose your self-discipline, and you never make that behavior change, okay? So it's very important to say, but I can make this change. I can do this. I have to do this for my health, for my grade, whatever it is, okay? So you have to give yourself this, when you give yourself this positive self-talk and you envision succeeding, you take away some of those mental roadblocks that are going to keep you from doing it. But you also have to think about your physical roadblocks, okay? So if you decided that you're going to hike Mount Whitney, the biggest mountain in the contiguous U.S., and you only have one leg, then maybe that's a physical roadblock that you should consider when you're making these goals, okay? So I say that as someone who has, my stepmother only has one leg, and she likes to make jokes all the time about how she's going to go and hike a mountain or swim the English Channel, and she laughs because to her, she thinks that she has already taken this idea of positive self-talk, and she knows, her own goals and her own limitations, and then she makes strategies around that are more reasonable. Still makes the rest of us very uncomfortable. She's funny. Okay, the very important thing is to share with others what you're doing. Okay, so that's why I'm here to be somebody you can talk to about this. It's also good if you make connections within the class and say, hey, even if it's something like, oh, I have to do this assignment. Well, what are you changing? Okay, so it's better to do positive talk, but even if the goal is, if your strategy is just to say, but I have to do it for class, and you get someone else who also has to do it for class, that is an enabling factor that can help you to actually make that behavior change. Okay, you want that encouragement and support. Humans, our brains really like it when someone else supports us. We're going to talk a lot about how loneliness is becoming a huge issue in the world right now, and it's causing a lot of mental distress for people. And so anytime you can get any kind of support, it will help you with positive behavior changes. Okay, now, Reinforcing factors. These are the things that are going to help you continue with your changes, okay? Again, that human connection, anytime you get any kind of praise. And this is where when somebody is talking to you about their journey, you want to be very positive about it, okay? If someone says, well, I've been working out for, 3 months and I've only lost 2 pounds, you don't want to be like, yeah, that sucks. That's not helpful because you're not taking into a lot of things. You're not taking a lot of things into account. You're not taking into the change in muscle versus fat mass. You're not taking into account water weight. All these things. There could be some medical factors that are also an issue. So anytime someone tells you they're doing something and they do see some sort of positive change, you always want to give them praise, okay? And if somebody is a jerk to you and says, you tell them, oh, I did this thing, and they're like, well, that's not a big deal. You can be like, actually, a small step is the first step. So calm down. This is actually pretty great. Okay. Again, give yourself rewards and encouragement. Okay. So if you are in anticipation of, well, if I just run 1 more mile, then I get to watch an episode of whatever, then that is you're saying, well, I just have to do this thing, and then the happy thing happens, and that will get you further. Okay. Recognize that small changes are still changes. They're very important. Okay. You can't, I used to teach an AP physics class, and the big goal of the class, one of the first things I tell them, even though I'm an animal lover, is how do you eat an elephant? So elephants are massive creatures, and the answer to this is 1 bite at a time. Now, don't eat elephants. They're very endangered. Don't eat them. But the idea is, how do you make these huge behavior changes? If we're talking in wellness, you make them by making small changes, 1 little change at a time. And think about when you do this, you're going to have a sense of achievement, which is amazing. And the more sense of achievement you have, the less stress you're going to have in your life. You're also going to have an increased lifespan, and you're going to feel better because you know you're making these changes. And some of these changes will themselves make you happier. So if you're eating less fast food, you are going to feel better because there are chemicals in fast food that inhibit happiness. And we'll talk all about it. Okay. So when you're doing this, you're going to be looking at your, and you're going to write all these things down in your behavior contract that we'll talk about your behavior change. And you're going to be looking at your baseline data and your target behavior. Like, I want to change my eating habits by this day. By the end of the class, I want to do this. Okay. And then you're going to start analyzing those changes. So that'll tell you where you need to put your effort and what barriers you need to take away. And the big thing about these goals, and these are, if you're a teacher or if you've been in any kind of teaching situation, this will sound familiar, and they use these also in businesses, SMART goals. You want to make goals that are specific, and you want to choose one thing. Don't be vague, like, I want to be healthier. Okay, if that were easy, if that were something easy to do, we wouldn't have entire fields of study and resources dedicated just to it. It'd be easy. So be specific. Don't say, I want to be healthy. Say, I want to cut sweets out of my diet. Something like that. Okay. Or I want to increase mental health. There's so many parts of health, right? Something SMART continuing. So S is for specific, M is for measurable. So you remember, part of this whole thing is gathering data and analyzing it. So if it's not something you can measure, it's not a good goal. So again, I want to be healthy doesn't take into the account that there's so many parts to being healthy and having wellness. So you want to pick something that you can measure. Even if it's, I just want to feel better. Okay. That can be something really tricky, but you know how you feel. So you can't say to somebody, hey, how do I feel today? But you can write that down. Okay. So that's still something measurable. It needs to be something attainable, so do something that's within your limits, okay? So, and again, when we say fitness, we don't just mean physical fitness, but that's something, the first thing that people think of. So, gaining some sort of wellness and fitness is better than none, or decreasing. So, make it, if something is attainable, if I use my stepmother as an example again, she's not going to run a marathon. She only has 1 leg, and the way her leg works, there's no kind of prosthetic she can put on her body to help her run. So running a marathon would not be an attainable goal for her. However, what she does instead is rowing, and that is something that is specific, measurable, and attainable. So for her, it works great. And also, you need to make a goal that is realistic, okay? You might have to lower your expectations. Now, if you say, I'm going to lose 50 pounds by September, it's already October, by December. That's not realistic. It's actually very unhealthy to lose that much weight so quickly. So you could say, instead of, I'm gonna lose something insane because I saw this one Instagram person do it, oh my god. Okay, first of all, people never put their failures on social media. They only put their successes. So don't take those with a grain of salt, okay? So, but what you can do is say, I want to lose 5 pounds by a certain date. That's something reasonable, like a month away or 2 months away. Okay, that is something very reasonable that you could accomplish depending on if that is your goal. Okay, and this, I keep saying by a certain time, and because time is very important. It's very important when you're making a goal to have a time, okay? So I know this as a teacher because it's very easy for me to say, hey, write this thing. And then people will be like, well, you didn't give me a due date, so I'm not going to do it until the very last second. And that is, teachers like say, oh, that means they're lazy. No, it means you're using your time effectively, okay? So one of the things to do when you're making a goal for your wellness is to set a time for it, okay? Like, I want to quit smoking. I want to decrease my cigarettes by at least 1 pack a day by December. And I say that because my dad smoked, or used to smoke until he had heart surgery, 3 packs of cigarettes a day. And he never gave himself goals because he had the many issues we'll talk about. He's my case study example. But if your goal is to decrease smoking, it might be too hard to say I'm going to quit by December, because that's a huge biological difference, okay? But you could decrease the number of cigarettes you take in per day by a certain time. Okay, cool. So then you're going to make a plan of action. How am I going to do this thing? Okay. You need to figure out, what do you need? How do you modify your environment? How can you control related habits? So if your goal is to decrease the amount of In-N-Out that you eat, the amount of hamburger or fast food that you eat, maybe make sure that you always have access to food at home or something healthy, okay? So when I was trying to get rid of fast food and meat out of my diet for health reasons, I made sure that I always had food at home that was easy to cook and that I really liked, okay? So that it would be my reward, like, oh, mac and cheese, oh my goodness, it's easy to make and I love it so much. And if I always had the materials for it, then I wouldn't be like, oh, there's nothing to eat at home. I might as well stop at Wendy's on the way home. So that's controlling related habits, okay? And it modified my environment. And when you have this plan of action, you need to make sure you give yourself rewards. So if your habit that you're trying to change is how effective your study habits are, because that is part of your fitness, your educational, cultural fitness, some other things. Well, maybe your reward is like, okay, I'm gonna do these assignments the best I can, and once I'm halfway through, I'm gonna take a break. I'm gonna go get a coffee. I'm gonna go and go to the aquarium. Oh my god, whatever it is, I'm gonna go see the sea otters. Something, little rewards that you can give yourself so that you have a reason to get through whatever thing you're trying to change. Okay, and that's more than just to be more well. Involve the people around you. One of the best things you can do is hold yourself accountable by making other people involved, okay? And give yourself plans for challenges. So let's use the fast food example. So I drive to the Bay Area a lot from LA. It's about a 5-6 hour drive. Or if I drive to Monterey from LA, it's about a 4.5 hour drive. And in that time span, I don't have time to cook. Obviously, I'm on the road. So if it's very easy for me to say, well, I'll get fast food on the way. Oh, that doesn't help me at all. So instead, I just make sure I bring lots of snacks that are at least reasonably healthy compared to stopping for In-N-Out. And then, again, the rehearsal contract, don't worry, it's your assignment, so you kind of have to. All right, so that's the end of Chapter 1, our first introduction to health and wellness. Our next lecture is going to be on stress, which I will tell you is my very favorite topic, so I'm going to have to try and not go insane with the lecture. And by favorite topic, I mean it's fascinating to see how terrifying stress can be. But don't stress about that right now, because we'll talk about it later. All right, please let me know if you have any questions, and be well. Bye.